The Anglo-Saxon evolution of the English language. The English we speak and write evolved greatly over time. Throughout history, the language went through a lot of changes, and it all started with the Anglo-Saxons. Although the language is much changed from its Germanic roots, some connections, as well as some extreme differences, can be seen. England was very different from many of the other countries in Europe, being separated from the rest of the continent by the English Channel. This detachment made it hard to connect with the other countries, especially during the Dark Ages. During the 400s, the Romano-British population carried out resistance against the invading Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, famous for their title as the Anglo-Saxons. Later in the 400s, the Anglo-Saxons took over Britain and divided it into 7 competing kingdoms. Occasionally, one kingdom would try to unite Britain, but the other kingdoms would quickly unite together to go against it and restore the balance of power. By 700, the Anglo-Saxons converted to Catholic Christianity. Being divided into 7 kingdoms made it easy for others to attack Britain, and Viking invasions caused 6 of the 7 kingdoms to be overrun. Wessex was the one remaining kingdom. These Viking raids caused the Anglo-Saxons to become stronger and build a more effective state of self-defense. They also eliminated the 6 kingdoms Wessex had been competing with before. Wessex began conquering one part of England after another. Wessex set up royal officials, known as thanes and reeves, to administer the king's justice throughout his realm. Saxon kings began collecting taxes to aid the military and prevent further attack from the Vikings. Later on, Germanic invaders came and settled in Britain from the northwest. All of these tribes and groups spoke languages related to German, such as Dutch, Frisian, German, Scandinavian languages, and Gothic. We do not have much information about the linguistics during this time period, due to the fact that there were almost no written records until several centuries later. Old English writings began emerging in the 7th, 8th, and 9th centuries, and there was a bit of variation between many of them. The Celts had already resided in England when the Anglo-Saxons arrived, but there are traces of their language in our English today. During year 1066 and after, the English vocabulary evolved greatly, having borrowings from French and Latin, along with the Scandinavian loanwords they had already adapted. During the late medieval and early modern periods, a standardization of the languages spoken in England occurred. Written and spoken language evolved in England, and for a long time a dialect was what was spoken within a particular area. These dialects were occasionally used in writing. The London Standard became used more commonly, especially in more formal contexts and amongst the more elevated members of society.
Various dialects exist within a language. Dialects are either very slight or very noticeable differences between groups of people speaking the same language. One dialect, through power or popularity, becomes a standard dialect. The dialect is spoken all over. When the Angles and the Saxons arrived in England, their languages were similar enough that they could understand each other. Because the Saxons were more warlike, the dialect of where they set themselves up, the West, became the standard dialect. The other main dialects most known about are the ones written down and preserved. Beyond that, there were dozens of other dialects for each village. 3 other main English dialects sprung up, including Kentish, Mercian, and Northumbrian. The Kentish were located in the southern part of England, the West Saxon dialect in the west, and the Northumbrian was north above the Humber River. However, the Midland dialects were what eventually formed the basis for modern English. As the Anglo-Saxons were conquered, the dialect of the popular city of London became the most popular dialect, and therefore the standard.
This is a sentence from a famous poem in Old English called Beowulf. This is it translated into more modern English. As you can see, it's almost impossible for a modern English speaker to understand Old English. That is because only a small portion of the words in modern English come from the early Anglo-Saxon words, but the remnants of Anglo-Saxon can still be seen in English. Most of the shorter words used today are Anglo-Saxon, like him.
Old English definitely seems pretty different, but it's still a direct ancestor of the form of English we speak today. That connection began with Proto-Indo-European, splitting into Germanic, which in turn became West Germanic over time. This evolved into Anglo-Frisian, which was the predecessor of Old English. From there, English underwent changes into Middle and eventually the modern English that we speak today. Modern English is most closely related to Farsi, which is the modern form of Frisian and Persian, Dutch, German, and Yiddish, which are other modern languages that grew from the Germanic section of the Indo-European tree. These people generally inhabited northern Europe and the United Kingdom. In the time of Old English, closely related languages included Old and Middle Dutch and Old High German. But it wasn't just a lot of the vocabulary that was different. The alphabet itself wasn't the same. Some examples of those differing letters are ja, sedia, sh, j, thorn, f, and ash. Ja made it sound like G, sedia sounded like ha, sh was pronounced as sk, j was a CG sound, thorn and f would have sounded like th, and the ash was the short a in words like ash. Due to the constant influx of new letters due to invasions, natural changes in a language over time, as well as several large-scale vowel shifts, many letters shifted writing and speaking conventions or disappeared entirely.
Another key aspect of the language is that all the nouns had gender. This may seem confusing, but this has nothing to do with the gender that most people talk about. A noun's gender is a part of the noun that doesn't change. There are 3 genders of nouns in Anglo-Saxon, just like in modern German. The gender impacts pronouns and adjectives in the sentence by adding endings or changing the word entirely. The 3 genders are masculine, feminine, and neuter, although plural has a different ending as well. Each of these genders give adjectives different endings based on the role of the noun in the sentence, like subject, direct object, or indirect object, and showing possession, as in toy's color in English is shown by the apostrophe s. This table shows that the demonstrative adjective that is declined, which is a fancy word for changing something other than a verb based on the gender of the noun that it's modifying. In English, for example, when the adjective that modifies something that is singular, like boy, it's that boy. But when it modifies something plural, like boys, it goes from that boy to those boys. A special ending has been added because the adjective modifies something plural. As you can see, there are many ways the noun's gender impact the language. We see a similar system in German to the language. However, in English, the genders eventually fell off. Anglo-Saxon paved the way for German and Old English, so it would make sense that they both had genders at one time.
In context, those gendered nouns were used to make sense of a language. There was a system of different endings for nouns and adjectives based off their qualities such as gender, case, and number, much like German today. Those endings were altered based off the context, and therefore the intent of the sentence was clearer. There were lots of different things that could affect the endings. As said, nouns had 3 genders, 4 different cases. Those were the nominative, or the subject of the sentence, the accusative, the direct object, the genitive for possession, and the dative for the indirect object. Besides all of that, pluralized nouns had different endings. A modern example of this can be seen in German today. Löffel in German means spoon. However, it is masculine, meaning the prefix would be der Löffel. Several spoons would be die Löffelin. In different cases, it might be said as den Löffel, dem Löffel, or des Löffel. It all depends on the context. To us, this would be like using multiple versions of the word the. It sounds confusing, but Old English speakers followed the same patterns as Germans did today. Let's show an example of this in Old English. The word stain, stone. Different context leads to different words. Different endings, different pluralizations, and this is only one word in one gender. This seems hard to us because in modern English we keep the word practically the same despite the situation where it is used, instead using the positioning of the word in the sentence and the context to understand what we are saying. This is a type of language orientation known as word order. Old English speakers use inflection, or the system of endings and prefixes for order. This is a different and seemingly foreign way of making sense of a language. They are not mutually exclusive, but often only one or the other is prevalent. In Old English, inflection was more important, meaning word order was not totally fixed. But as the language shifted over time, inflection disappeared and word order became more standardized, leading to modern English today.
When the Anglo-Saxons arrived in England, they had a set language. As they continued to be conquered, their language shifted to be what it is today. However, there are still a number of Anglo-Saxon words in our vocabulary. While only about 1% of all English words are actually words from Old English, these include the most essential words, taking up about half of our everyday speech. Their interaction with various languages formed English into what it is today, and will keep on changing as our language progresses.